Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the session, and I hope you all had a great lunch. So the previous session has talked about the displacement by design, which brought attention to the topic on how the narrative that cities are critical for the economic growth has taken center stage, and how these systems are designed in such a way that some parts of the society has been ignored. As you are aware, a lot part of the urban population lives or relies on the informal systems for meeting basic needs, owing to government failure to provide adequate housing, jobs, and services, and renders them vulnerable to the vagaries of nature, the state, corporate, and the middlemen. Sudden evictions, police harassment, displacement due to disasters, uncertain employment, payment delays, homelessness, and irregular food supply are few things that people in this marginalized sector has been subjected to. So in this session, we have three speakers who are focusing on different topics. One is the street vendors and pedestrians and right of way. And the next topic, urban poor and right to the shelter. And third topic is informal waste pickers and right to livelihoods. The speakers of the session will share their experience and expertise on how useful information can be used to provide visibility of these previously unseen people and problems in cities. Now, I would like to invite Vinay Sreenivasa from ALF. Vinay Sreenivasa is an educator and member of ALF, and his areas of interest include urban transport, urban poverty, informal sector, and urban governance. He has been part of initiatives promoting free and open source software in the government, and he is also part of the Street Vending Union, Bangalore. Little change in the schedule. Right now, Dr. Karen will talk about urban poor and right to shelter. Dr. Karen is an urban anthropologist currently working as an assistant professor at the Madras Institute of Development Studies in Chennai, where she focuses her research on urban governance and reforms, urban civil society and collective action, urban poverty, the informal sector, and shelter policy. Dr. Karen received her PhD in social culture anthropology from the University of Arizona, USA in 2004, and since been the recipient of Richard Carlehan Fellowship awarded by the Werner Grant Foundation for Anthropological Research, and an independent fellowship with Sarai, a program of the Center of Study of Developing Societies, Delhi. Her case, she has quite worked on various research projects. The main important thing is being the settlement and struggle in Chennai's Buckingham Canal working class histories of the city, where the problems of different urban planning has been discussed. So now I would like to invite Dr. Karen to talk about urban poor and right to shelter.
It's good to see a few more people than I thought there would be just the organizers and the speakers for the afternoon session, but nice to see more people. It's nice Chennai. To be here today.
We need AC. It is Chennai, so we
all right. Well, maybe I provide entertainment as well as the AC. So I thought I'd like to start with pointing to a trend that we might all be aware of and maybe not, which is the sort of peripheralization of the urban poor, which is occurring across all Indian cities today. And this is a trend that is pushing low-income working class families, low-caste families, migrants, religious minorities sometimes, pavement dwellers, etc., to large resettlement colonies, which are in the best case scenario located on the edges. Okay, now let me see if I can get this moving. To resettlement colonies which are, in the best case scenario, they're right on the edges of the cities. Like in Chennai, we have Kannaginagar, Semencheri, Perumbakam. And then increasingly from about 2014, they're way out. They're like out in the rural areas. So we have a place called Gudapakam now, which has been built, which is 35 kilometers from the center of the city, and it's literally in a rural area. So this is where we are sending out our working class families now. And these are mass ghettos built by the state, housing several thousands of families. So Perumbakam, okay, here we go, and if I had the pointer, this is Gudapakam, which is way outside. This is the old boundary of the city. It was a later boundary of the city, 2011. Metropolitan area. Gudapakam is outside all of that, and this is all outside the old boundary. Kannaginagar, Perumbakam, Cemetery. Just to give you a geography of these places. Okay, and Perumbakam, for instance, has 23,000 units in it. So does Kanaginagar, 23,000 units. These are huge. So what we're seeing, I think, is a new urban social geography where the working classes that have built and continue to service this city are rendered fringe inhabitants of the city that they are, working in. Also, this is a new geography of caste, because you will find that the vast majority, over 50% of these resettlement colonies are, are inhabited by SC and MBC. So that's the figures that you'll find, and it's still not working. Right, and in fact, because of this the spatial apartheid that I'm talking about, and also the fact that these colonies are so poorly serviced and so squalid in many ways, this is being called a new form of urban untouchability. That is something that the activists have labeled this trend. And this trend of mass peripheralization of the urban poor is closely associated with a set of transformations that have been unrolling across India from the 1990s. Programs and missions of urban renewal like JNNURM, like Amrut, like smart cities, or indeed actually the sort of whole slew of some slum-free cities and housing for all programs that are also unrolling. I am seeing this mass resettlement as the flip side of those. In fact, mass resettlement of this kind is the flip side or the condition of possibility for the world-class cities that our cities are all aspiring to. So, what is the problem here? Yes, so this is Gudapakam, and I'll just show you some of those. Okay, go next. Right. What is the problem? While I think the problem may be evident to some of us who work in these places, I realize from the outside this actually sounds like a good thing. So slum dwellers are who are living in squalid shacks, pavement dwellers, etc., are being given concrete housing with toilets, decent housing by the government, which they can eventually own and which they have to pay very little for. Indeed, mass evictions of the urban poor are justified by the government on the grounds that they are getting alternative housing in integrated townships, so-called integrated townships, with everything, access to all amenities, including schools, hospitals, childcare centers, playgrounds, parks, etc. So perhaps we can achieve slum-free cities through these housing for all programs. The fact is that we have not so far, and these programs have been going on for at least a decade and a half now, or almost two. And in fact, calls for slum-free cities have been actually put out since before independence in cities like Chennai. And not only have this number of slums increased even over the last decade, but these resettlement colonies have been seen to reproduce and perpetuate poverty, and that's really what my talk is going to be about today. So why have they failed? Next. Yeah. So the first reason why I think they failed is a kind of a framing problem. I think these projects rely on a set of reductions. So they reduce the problem of urban poverty to the problem of slums, and they reduce the problem of slums to the problem of housing. And therefore slum-free cities become synonymous with housing for all, and in all of these the task becomes to build as many houses as possible and allocate them to the houseless. So that is the simple solution, and it actually pleases a lot of people, as you can imagine. However, as we know, the problem of urban poverty is about much more than housing. It is a problem of low wages, informal and insecure jobs, a lack of social protection, unemployment or underemployment, disability, ill health, host of other things that are primarily to do with an economy that cannot provide decent jobs to people, and where 70% of the urban workforce is informal. In addition, a lot of scholars have questioned the extent of overlap between slums and urban poverty, or the extent to which slums serve as a proxy for urban poverty. They pointed out that the spatialities of poverty in Indian cities are pretty complex, comprising a range of types of settlement, all the way from squatter settlements, pavement dwellings, to migrant labor, shacks, hutment collections, and slums and slum rehabilitation colonies. and that there is a sort of a shift and a movement of the urban poor between these things. But let me point out that that shift is not linear. It doesn't reflect a sort of linear progression in well-being or in income across that spectrum. What it does constitute is a sort of a complex circuit around which the urban poor negotiate trade-offs between access to decent shelter and access to other urban opportunities such as employment and education for their children. So they have to negotiate these things. So in some then, a slum or even a pavement dwelling may actually constitute a preferred option for a working class family than a tenement in a rehabilitation colony 30 kilometers outside the city. So this is the kind of domain in which we are dealing. So it's not about housing and it's not just about location, it's about many other things. So thus, while slums may actually constitute the highest concentration perhaps of the urban poor in a city, it must also be noted that the slums, some of the poorer city dwellers may not make their way into slums, and that not all slum residents are poor. So I think this is also an important part of the framing that we need to recognize. I also want to say that this official tendency to reduce urban poverty to the problem of slums has been exacerbated in recent policy documents by this concept of shelter poverty that has been put out, for instance, in this high-powered expert committee HPEC report chaired by Ishar Ahluwalia, where they argue that shelter poverty is actually harder to overcome than individual poverty and indeed perpetuates individual poverty. Now, I think that reframing urban poverty as a function of housing and basic services allows for supply-side solutions that focus on hardware and infrastructure provision as pathways to slum-free cities and as measures of inclusive urban development. And we know that given the appetite of most governments or of most governments, private contractors, etc., for large engineering and concrete solutions to any schemes, this center staging of housing provision as a pivot of poor policy, pro-poor policy, has brought us back. It's actually brought us back in regress to mass peripheral resettlement as the most sort of pro-poor approach that cities across the country are adopting today. So one is, what I pointed out is one reason why resettlement has not succeeded is about framing. The second is about a set of conditions, realities to do with the resettlement colonies themselves. The first one, of course, is location. As I pointed out, most of them, the minimum distance from the center of the city is 25 kilometers. It's now going more towards 50 and 60 kilometers outside the city. So this resettling urban working classes in remote and relatively underserviced places on the edges of cities means, as we all know, a violent disruption not only of their livelihood but also of their social occupational networks and the schooling of their children and a host of other assets that they have painstakingly constructed as part of their pathways out of poverty for many, many decades. So this becomes a significant setback, and rebuilding these pathways may take several years, even where the government is actively assisting them by providing adequate transportation and other necessities, which most often, by the way, they don't do. Indeed, it is doubtful whether these pathways of socio-economic mobility ever get fully rebuilt for a large proportion of these vulnerable families in these resettlement camps. So, for example, a study that we conducted in 2010 or 11, in 10 to 11 in Karnagi Nagar on livelihoods, so this is 10 years after these families had been, after the first set of families had been settled there. This study highlighted the multiple pathways through which mass peripheral resettlement of the urban poor serves to perpetuate and reproduce poverty. First, it reveals the dilemmas of housing as an anti-poverty instrument. Despite being offered concrete homes with toilets, etc., at low monthly hire purchase rates, over 50% of the allottees, according to the Slum Clearance Board's own estimates, had sold their flats and returned to high rent or squatter accommodation within the city within the 10 years, actually within the 5 years, the first 5 years. The isolation of this resettlement site, the dislocation from jobs, economic opportunities and schools, and the dearth of basic facilities in the earlier years rendered this place a wasteland of despair, reputed for its squalor, alcoholism, and violent crime, and these were the stories you were getting in the press about Kannaginagar in the years before 2010. Of course, 11 years later, inevitably, the settlement has been transformed into a buzzing, vibrant neighborhood. And after 2011, when it came within the city boundaries, then a lot of the infrastructure also changed and improved to a great extent. But then hidden behind this newly whitewashed walls and new parks, etc., are years of neglect and misery and years of struggle by the residents for water, electricity, roads, transport, and jobs. These struggles and the rupture that almost all workers had suffered in their occupational trajectory, ranging from a few months to several years, had cost them very dearly in what we call development time. That is the time they invest to work through this ladder of prosperity to a place where they're in a better place. Many had to rebuild from scratch all of these things, their networks, their skills, their career mobility. A full quarter of the families that of the 1,000 or so workers that we surveyed, had either lost jobs or abandoned working altogether after the resettlement. And the vast majority of these were women. Women's employment was among the greatest casualties of the forced move. Women's jobs, which are concentrated mostly in domestic work, unskilled factory work, or in office or sales assistance, are very location specific and therefore highly vulnerable to the disruptions caused by resettlement. But in addition, the challenges of running a household in a resettlement context with poor water facilities, weak social network, and a lack of childcare facilities compound the problems of distance, timing, and transport. These conditions force large numbers of women out of the labor force. So even after a decade, when job opportunities had become abundantly available because of the IT corridor which was nearby, women's employment was still low, fluctuating, and precarious. Jobs for Kannaginagar's women, even in large global firms on the IT corridor, were of poor quality. Almost without exception, these were casual, insecure, poorly paid, with very physically taxing conditions, long hours, and very scant opportunities for career mobility or getting to a better place. So women quit their jobs very frequently and voluntarily because of the impacts of the strenuous work and their long hours on their health, on their children and families. And this in turn kept them from climbing higher up the ladder and perpetuated this vicious cycle of working poverty. So the major problem here then was not the quantity of work but the quality. The quality of jobs that were on offer for Kannaginagar's residents. This poor quality available to them was at least partly owing to the ghetto effect of this mass resettlement. Badly maintained infrastructure, Badly maintained infrastructure and poor living conditions contributed to a strong and persistent stigma that was attached to this colony as a den of drunks and thieves. Despite a significant proportion of educated workers, this reputation marked it as a place for low-skilled, low-wage workers. So people said that when they went and they got a job or they had to come back with the address proof, the job went away. And this you hear till today, 17 years later. Residents themselves echo this characterization of this place. So they say this is a place for the labor class, it is a place for poor people. That is how they see this place. So if the first problem is location, the second one is siting. A common feature of resettlement colonies across several cities, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Delhi, is that they are constructed on ecologically fragile floodplains and marshlands, low-value marginal lands used for dumping wastes of different kinds. And this is, next please. This is certainly true of Chennai's 3 largest resettlement colonies constructed after 2000. They're all built on the vast Palikarnai marshland system. You can see Kannaginagar there, which is right in that thing. Next, please. So while intending to mitigate the ecological vulnerability of slums as that are on the banks of water bodies, etc., this form of resettlement actually produces a new set of vulnerabilities to disaster, both everyday and episodic. Kannaginagar and Semencheri get routinely flooded even during normal monsoons, and in the floods of 2015 and the cyclone of 2016, they were very badly affected. So and the third is the poor condition of services and amenities in these settlements. The term substandard settlements, ironically enough, is something that we use as a euphemism for slums. But here across the country, it accurately reflects the conditions in these state-built resettlement colonies that are intended to improve the shelter conditions and lives of slum dwellers. So these are really substandard places. Kannaginagar and Semencheri, the first big sites that are presented by the Slum Board as strong examples of their integrated townships, providing all amenities to working class families, were for several years isolated wastelands of squalor and neglect. What happens is typically that evictions and resettlement are done in a hurry, and people are moved because they're doing it to project deadlines, infrastructure project deadlines. So people are moved before the place is ready, before water and sanitation is put in, before roads are properly laid, and once they're moved, they're left to their own devices. So then it becomes their problem. So by the late 2000s, both settlements had become notorious as squalid wastelands of despair and destitution. In Kannaginagar, for example, it took the colony about 10 years of struggle by its residents in the form of protests, petitions, postcards, press campaigns to obtain a basic level of services in water and electricity. Can you go? Window grills crumbling, roofs leaking, sewer pipes broken, the walls are damp, people are afraid that if their children touch the walls during the rains, they'll get shocks. This is the kinds of fear conditions that they live in. Drainage regularly backs up into the first floor apartments. Now, while in the older resettlement sites, some of these services have improved substantially in the couple of decades since their inception, there is still a discriminatory second-tier standard of services that are evident here. So we conducted a short, in fact with Gayatri here, a short audit of services in Semancheri, where we found it was even in cases where quantitatively there was, coming close to fulfilling the norms, qualitatively they were really poor. So for example, Semancheri, which houses about 6,500 families, has a primary school, but classrooms are inadequate in number and size, teachers do not take their job seriously, the quality of the food is poor. Nobody has been hired to clean the school toilets, so teachers ask parents to contribute to hire a cleaner. There were no health facilities for the first 6 years. Then a primary health center was built with corporate donations, but only 3 of the 5 sanctioned doctors have been posted. All of these are trainee doctors with no experience, so patients with even slightly complicated ailments are sent to, to some other hospital. All first-time deliveries are sent away. There are no inpatient admissions at this hospital. Doctors are fearful and disdainful of the residents. The pharmacy is poorly stocked, etc. I could just go on. There are only 4 ration shops when the norms dictate 7. So there are long lines of wait, and usually the supplies are over by the time people reach the counter. So they return empty-handed after a long wait. There should be 32 childcare centers, but there are 8. Norms require that they should have a 600 square feet space, but they are sited inside the tenements of 150 square feet. So they are a quarter of the size they should be. Water supply and electricity are unreliable, etc. As I said, some of these conditions do improve over time, a rather long period of time, as we saw in Kannaginagar. But in the meanwhile, they have taken their toll on the neighborhood, on the morale of the residents, on its reputation, its character, and its future. They have contributed to the stigma that the neighborhood and its residents carry. So after more than a decade of transformation in these settlements, despair and destitution still manifest in a complex of social issues such as high rates of alcoholism. You can just go through that. Violent crime, conflict, school dropout, gang activity, and drug abuse among youth. And so it is probably in this sort of ongoing criminalization of the very young in these settlements that we get the strongest critique of this line that we are providing alternative accommodation, this normalization of mass peripheral ghetto-type resettlement as a solution to slum-free cities, or as an approach to slum-free cities. So basically, even in the new resettlement sites, Gudapakam and Perumbakam, all built since 2014 with slightly better standards of building, slightly bigger houses, running water and electricity provided upfront. So in some ways, physically, they're better built, etc., better provided. Yet here too, the problem that men, women, and girls repeatedly emphasized was the issue of safety. Crime, conflict, safety for women, girls, and youth in general are the biggest issues, and we are finding this across the country. Mahul in Mumbai, right? All of the places outside of Delhi, every one of these places, you're finding the same pattern, that these have become fearful places for parents to raise their children in. So all of this then suggests why mass-scale state-constructed peripheral resettlement schemes work more as a strategy to eradicate the poor from the city than to eradicate poverty or clear slums. Because for urban working classes, maintaining a stable foothold in urban space is more critical to their socio-economic mobility and well-being than the bald benefit of housing with no spatial kind of meaning to it. As long as housing is de-linked from basic services, access to employment and education, etc., we will not get rid of slums. So then, indeed, just to close up, this framework of adequate housing, as defined by the UN Habitat and quoted in all our national policy documents, or not all, but many of them, like the Deepak Parekh Committee report, encompasses a range of things, security of tenure, but also a range of material, environmental and social conditions, including space, lighting, adequate security, basic amenities, and accessible location with regard to work and other amenities. And in the words of the UN Human Rights Commissioner, he says, the human right to adequate housing is more than just 4 walls and a roof. It is the right of every woman, man, youth and child to gain and sustain a safe and secure home and community in which to live in peace and dignity. One of the things that we actually identified as really the thing most lacking in the resettlement colonies is dignity. The way that people are spoken to, whether it is by state officials, bus conductors, the slum clearance board officials, electricity board officials, they are talked to in a humiliating manner as if they're lucky to get a house, and so therefore why should you complain about anything else? So it is the issue of dignity, I think, that is most of all compromised in the state provided housing that they get. So to close, I'm going to refer you back to the idea of the right to the city. This is actually a radical idea which, as some scholars have actually been pointing out, has been tamed and circumscribed to mean just right to shelter or housing, which then gets operationalized through finance and mortgage arrangements. The right to the city is perhaps the opposite of the right to property. In its original conception by Henri Lefebvre, it was a call to action to resist the kinds of capitalist appropriations that were occurring at the time, that were disempowering or disenfranchising common citizens. And also to counter visions of the city as simply a spatial fix for capitalist surplus. So in David Harvey's words, the right to the city is, I quote, the right to change ourselves by changing the city. It is a collective rather than an individual right. In other words, it is about collective transformations of visions of the city. A right to shape the city, to collectively realize the possibilities lying in the city for invention and reinvention, new socialities, new politics, collective visions of justice. It entails conceiving of cities as commons, meaning all inhabitants should have the capacity to equally access the urban resources, services, goods and opportunities of city life and participate in the making of the city. So in this way, I'm sort of tying in to some of the ideas that were raised in the earlier session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karen, for helping us understand how urban housing and the resettlement policies affected the lives of urban poor in Chennai. For our next session on informal waste sector and the right to livelihood, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Lakshmi Narayan from Swachh-KKPKP. Lakshmi Narayan is the founding member of KKPKP and she is also the co-founder of Swachh Pune. KKPKP serves as a platform for voicing grievance and medium for pushing development programs for the low-caste women. Lakshmi Narayan will share her experience on how a collective can change lives. So I'd like to hand over to Lakshmi Narayan.
गुड मॉर्निंग पुणे. सकाळचे 7 वाजलेले आहेत. स्वच्छची गाडी आली हो. हे पुढचं गाणं स्वच्छच्या बायांकरिता.
बाजू बाबू समझो इशारे और पुकारे यहाँ चलती को गाड़ी कहते हैं प्यारे
माझं नाव रेखा. मी पण स्वच्छ संस्थाची सभासद आहे.
माझं नाव अनिता डाके. आम्ही तिघी आरोप सांभाळतो. पिंपरी चिंचवडने जे कचऱ्याचं काम स्वच्छला दिले, आता बघा आम्ही हे कसं हाताळतो. आम्ही सर्व स्वच्छच्या महिला 2.5 लाख घरातला कचरा उचलतो. त्याच्यामध्ये 1.5 टन ओला कचरा, 50 टन सुका कचरा काढतो.
त्यामुळं आपल्या महापालिकेला खूप फायदा होतो. 50,000 रुपये रोजची त्यांची बचत होते.
आमची रूट साय चौकात चालू होते. अनिता वरी बसते आणि रेखा साईडनं चलते बाकी त्या घेऊन गाडीमध्ये टाकते. मी गाडी चालवते.
गर्दीमध्ये खूप माणसं असतील ना तिथं तर गाडी लगेच फुल होती. 2 तासामध्ये गाडी लोड होती. लोड झाली की लगेच आम्हाला डम्पिंगला जायला.
सुरुवातीला गाडी एकदम हळूची, कारण सुरुवातीला गाडी आली की थोडं कचरा येतो, पण एकदा स्पीड वाढली की बस विचारूच नका, कचऱ्यावर कचरा कचरा कचरा.
त्यांना मी महिन्याला भेटायला जाते.
माझे पोरं हॉस्टेलला आहेत, पोती कधीचे पोरं हॉस्टेलला आहेत. येतील पण आता दिवाळीच्या सुट्ट्या लागल्यात ना, आता मला त्यांची आणायची तयारी करायची. एक गाडी सुकाने ओला कचरा वेगळा करायला किती वेळ लागतो, काय काम असतो मला.
बघा आम्हाला किती वेळ होतोय. टाइम लावून आम्ही शॉटिंग करतोय.
करायला 1 तास 15 मिनिटं लागलेली, म्हणून आम्ही सांगतो वल्ला सुका वेगळा द्या. 100 गाड्या तिथं, मग येणार कॉन्ट्रॅक्टर किती 10-15 मिनिटं आपण इथं सुका काढणार, कॉन्ट्रॅक्टर येणार घेऊन जाणार, खाली करणार मुशीला नेऊन, मग तिथं काय पर्यावरण गाणंच होणार ना. 116 गाड्यांचा कचरा बघा आता 6 तासात कॉन्ट्रॅक्टर मध्ये घालवायचं. तुम्ही जर पाहिला तर आम्हाला वेळ मिळत नाही, मग बराच कचरा तसाच मिक्स मध्ये जातो.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt this, but I think there's a time constraint. So, I represent a trade union of waste pickers called Kagad Kach Patra Kashtakari Panchayat, which translates as Paper, Tin, Metal Workers Association. We started working with waste pickers in the year 93 and decided to register as a trade union because we felt very strongly that the work of waste pickers is not necessarily seen by even waste pickers themselves as work. They very often just think that it's their way to fill their stomachs, and that is of course work, but we feel that it is productive not only for themselves and their families, but it contributes significantly to the environment and to reducing municipal solid waste handling costs. So over the years, we registered in 93 and struggled for various things. The municipal way of looking at it is probably give them an inch and they take a yard, but we started with asking first for identity cards and insisting that the municipality needs to recognize this as work. So after a lot of struggles and protest marches and dharnas, we managed to get a piece of paper from the municipality, which really is just a piece of paper. But of course, waste pickers have been very creative in their use of identity cards, and they've used it both in court and for financial purposes, all of things which they're not supposed to. They have also, after the I-card, we argued that the waste pickers need to be covered under an insurance policy because they are compromising their health in protecting the environment. And the municipality bought into that extremely reasonable argument, and therefore all the waste pickers in Pune are covered under a health insurance program. And our last demand came up in the year 2000 when the municipal solid waste handling rules were being framed, where we argued that what is the point in giving an identity card that asserts that you're a waste worker and then insurance that protects you because you're handling waste if you don't first have the access to the waste itself. So that's when our one of the flagship slogans of the organization is Kachra Amcha Malkicha Nahi Kudacha Bapacha, which basically is a not very polite way of saying garbage belongs to us, it's not your father's waste. And our argument, it's actually the National Alliance slogan as well, and we actually use it internationally too now. Our argument has been that waste pickers have been handling waste very effectively and in a manner that is much better for the environment, not only for their livelihoods, but has ensured a large level of diversion from the landfill and has ensured that it is allowing for a lot of recycling to happen, which would just not happen if it were not for them. And therefore, the very minimum the municipality needs to do is to look at ways to include them, to integrate them in solid waste management processes. So in Pune, we managed to argue that the work of waste collection is best done by waste pickers, and so in the year 91 has been a year that everyone has referred to in their presentations. But in the year 2000, we argued that the waste pickers of Pune should be doing waste collection work, and when the municipal solid waste handling rules were announced, we started lobbying with the municipality for that. In the year 2005, we insisted that no other private contractor be given the work, but that a cooperative of waste pickers should do the work. Of course, I think a lot of the speakers before me have already lambasted SPVs, PPPs, and we are all of that. But that's the only space we have. So Swachh itself is a PPP. It's a pro-poor private-public organization, and really without ensuring that we got into that space and ensured that the waste pickers had the rights over waste established in some manner, waste pickers would have probably been displaced. We were also in touch with waste picker groups outside of Pune, outside of India, and saw how displacement really looked, how mechanical vehicles, collection, capital intensive, centralized waste management models are generally replacing, and that's the paradigm across, and as our municipalities see more and more aggressive vending of these same technologies and these old same systems, they're likely to move towards that. So without really having our foot in place, we didn't think there was any argument to ensure the protection of livelihoods of waste pickers. So we argued for the cooperative Swachh. Now Swachh is a slightly different cooperative. It not only is a cooperative of waste pickers which offers a front-end waste management solution, collection service to citizens of Pune, but it's a user fee based model. So the waste pickers are paid by a user fee that is shelled out monthly by every citizen of Pune whom they service. In Pune we service around 600,000 households out of around 10 lakh households. And so each of these 3,500 waste pickers who are part of Swachh, Swachh itself is a subset of KKPKP, which is a larger trade union. So around 3,500 of our 10,000 members are doing doorstep collection of waste under the aegis of Swachh. And citizens are paying them a user fee. The municipality pays Swachh an overhead management cost to run the service across the city. So the one big selling point of the model has been that it is slightly difficult for the municipality to replace, because what the PMC pays Swachh annually is less than around 3 crores or close to 3 crores, whereas no other private contractor will ever manage to or agree to work under those terms, because it's very difficult. In our user fee based model, the waste picker gets the money directly from the citizen, and recovering any part of that cost is possible only through a cooperative, where they pay a small percentage of their earnings to the cooperative, which ensures that it's financially viable. But it's very difficult, obviously, for a contractor to replicate the model. So the one reason Swachh has still been around, despite the political turmoil, despite the fact that we ourselves are pretty fed up of running a waste management service for middle class citizens who are apathetic, not willing to even segregate their waste, not ready to pay up on time. The only reason is because the municipality also finds it very difficult to displace Swachh, because it offers a solution to the municipality that is also very low cost. So if they have to change from Swachh to any other model, the immediate payout for the municipality is going to be at least 10 times more. So in fact, this film that we just saw is a film of how the model worked in PCMC, where we are not actually working anymore, where we've signed out of the contract because the municipality not only violated the contract in many ways, but also brought in a private player in the rest of the city to work on terms that were completely different. So we protested that, took the municipality to court, and insisted that the waste pickers get integrated. So the waste pickers of PCMC actually are working on a minimum wage based contract, and they also have access to the dry waste that they collect from the vehicles. So actually in financial terms, they probably earn more than the waste pickers of Pune, who are part of the Swachh model. However, they don't have the level of autonomy, flexibility, ownership that a waste picker of Pune has, who's actually literally owning Swachh, deciding the size of the pocket she operates in, learning to do composting and so on. So coming back to how does this model ensure that the waste picker's livelihood is protected? What the Pimpri precedent has also proven to us, as well as to the elected representatives and administrators and maybe even the citizens of Pune, is that even if Swachh is displaced, which like I said, many of us ourselves are not completely averse to, not many waste pickers, well not many, some waste pickers also may be open to the idea, because everyone recognizes that they cannot do without waste pickers. So all the waste pickers who already have a foot in the system are unlikely to be pushed out, because it's going to be a big issue. However, on the flip side, it also means that after 10 years of close engagement with the municipality, Amita spoke earlier about how it's the close engagement, the close partnerships, the discussions, the nuances that make each side richer, more aware of the depth of how the informal sector works, what the scrap trade looks like. And that I think we can all vouch for all of Pune's administrative staff in the SWM department. They all understand the invisible side of waste, the scrap trade, much better than perhaps any other SWM department in any other city in India. The flip side, however, is that when we say waste pickers will get integrated even if Swachh doesn't continue, it basically means that all these years of arguing for a model that in principle is decentralized, low cost, environmentally viable may not sustain. And for us it becomes a question of, do we really want to continue to fight that battle if we have fewer and fewer stakeholders in the process? If it's only the waste pickers fight to ensure that you run a beautifully decentralized, environmentally sustainable model, why should the city's poorest take the onus of doing that? I mean, the municipality is paying out much higher amounts in solid waste management contracts to private parties, and why should the USP of a waste picker cooperative be its low cost? So this is a reason why when the first 5-year term of Swachh ended, which was around the year 2013, we had decided we would not renew it unless the municipality came back to us, which they finally did. And since 2016-17, we have a new contract which is for another 5 years. The fact, however, is that for a 2-year period when there was no contract officially between Swachh and the municipality, around the 2,000 odd waste pickers who were servicing citizens continued to collect the waste, because the service relationship between the citizen and the waste picker was already established. They would probably, I mean, it was like domestic work or any other allied service. So it had allowed for a foot into the system, which currently still remains. I mean, it's like I said, it's probably difficult for the waste picker to get completely dislodged in either Pune or Pimpri. However, again, coming back to, is it only the worker protection that we're looking at? Of course, we as Swachh and KKPKP, that's a big part of our priority, that we are registered as a trade union. We believe strongly that even if we are environmental, we are the Browns, we would first look at the workers' rights. But equally we feel that there is actually so much potential to handle things like waste, but waste as a classic example, in such a simple manner. Just ensure segregation at source, just ensure organic composting, in situ composting. In fact, we have undertaken a pretty ambitious project now with the smart city of Pune, where we basically argued that the smart city is not at all inclusive, as many other people have already pointed out. And to ensure that smart cities at least become a little more inclusive, why don't you come up with models that are likely to ensure the informal sector is integrated? So we've sort of worked out a model where we're saying that let's work towards a municipality not collecting organic waste at all, and in a reasonably big part of the city, so we want to do it to scale, ensure that if we can actually make the environmental and economic calculations, establish that it's more viable for the municipality to invest in infrastructure for composting in situ than in actually transporting the waste across the city towards the centralized landfill, where you're paying a lot for the fuel, creating traffic and pollution and other issues, and also running a model that is not sustainable, where landfill site affected villagers, others are going to sooner or later protest. These costs are going to increase, and instead of moving towards a more mechanized model, why don't you move towards this, which they have agreed to. The current bureaucrat who's heading the smart city in Pune is open to all this, which is why it's going on like that. Coming back to a few other things that a model like Swachh manages to achieve, which is more than just maybe worker livelihood protection. It's possible to experiment with a number of things. A lot of us, I mean, including me as a representative of KKPKP, are quick to blame the municipality, and the municipality absolutely deserves a fair share of the blame. But equally, waste is a very complex problem. I mean, it's not as if anyone has cracked the code so effectively of how to handle it. It's not as if the Western paradigm, the EU or the US have great ways of handling waste at all. And all the flashy kind of trips and visits and exposure that our bureaucrats have or our elected representatives have are often to these waste to energy plants and to flashy collection vehicles outside. There are not really very good, robust, decentralized models to scale outside for any of us to emulate. So the advantage that Swachh offers is that it allows us to target different kinds of players. So we've been working closely with the municipality with looking at issues of difficult to handle waste. So there's sanitary napkins and diapers which are a challenge to recycle. They're very expensive to recycle. There is one recycling plant in Italy which is trying to recycle sanitary napkins. Otherwise, they usually get incinerated or go to the landfill. Now there are mini incinerators in many cities across India which are terribly toxic and polluting and expensive. It probably costs 4 to 5 rupees to incinerate a single pan, but many municipalities and Rotary clubs and several people are investing in those kinds of processes. What we decided to do a few years ago on Women's Day, I think in 2010 or 12, was we did a massive send it back campaign of used sanitary napkins. Basically, we had tried to engage with the 4 big players: Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, Johnson & Johnson, and well, was it? I don't think so. Anyway, and tried to say package it differently so that a person who uses it, any consumer can actually dispose it in a packet which is very easy to identify, and no one actually has to go through a tea bag or a piece of paper and find a sanitary napkin inside. It's horrible for the dignity of the worker, apart from the health and hygiene issues. And after 2-3 years of unsuccessfully trying to convince them and having several meetings here and outside where they would like to discuss it, but not actually take any action, one send it back campaign, and in 15 days they had come to talk to the municipality about how they could take it forward. Of course, even after that, they've taken their sweet time to actually come up with something for it. But a lot of these, I mean, at least the 4 big players are now willing to at least invest in collection systems because they understand that it is becoming a big worker issue. We are also saying that it really is an extended producer responsibility issue where the producer has to take, I mean, they're charging high rates for these products, they are advertising at even higher rates, and therefore they have to absolutely take the cost of disposal. It will ultimately obviously mean that they're going to put it back on the consumer and we'll have to pay 2-3 times as much, but so be it. Either we don't use those products or we agree to pay a higher price for some of these things, and the market will probably level that out. Similar thing is happening with the plastic ban in Maharashtra. I just heard today that it's likely to get implemented here also. So in Maharashtra, and like in many other cities, the plastic ban has been implemented, and unfortunately, again, once more, the government as well as corporates who learn about such a thing and learn about Swachh immediately come first and say, will Swachh become a PRO, or will Swachh become an entity which starts amalgamating the waste and collecting it? Whereas our whole argument is that the idea of Swachh itself is to strengthen and secure the conditions of work of informal sector workers. So actually making Swachh bigger than the waste picker never makes sense. It's more sensible to actually look at the next level of trade, which is the scrap dealers, to whom waste pickers are typically selling the material, and ensure that you create an institutional mechanism where it's viable for them to collect the difficult to collect plastics. So our argument is that instead of the plastic ban just looking at banning items, which of course some of them they need to, they should look at the difficult to recycle products, materials, and ensure that the producers are putting a kind of minimum support price for collecting that item, and that whole entire thing should sit on the existing informal sector platform. And if one can actually organize it through a pricing mechanism that is really like a minimum support price, which the industry has to take because they are essentially bringing this product out, but of course along with it plan a phase out and redesign options and newer materials which are not so difficult to recycle. So some of these processes for engagement, which I think are also critical in our democracy, because it's not as if the government is going to come up with very many new models. So the problem when we fight from the outside, which we are doing in many cases, is that one cannot actually come up with newer models to engage. So the advantage that the Swachh model offers, apart from, like I said, protecting the livelihoods, is also that it gives us the room to engage and come up with some kind of models which we can test out with the municipality, with the state government, with the central government. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lakshmi, for sharing information on various topics, let it be as recycling is not the option, and how producers should take the blame, and how incineration is a bad solution to take upon, and how waste and energy solutions are a fancy options. Thank you so much for your insights. And now to talk on street vendors, pedestrians and right of way, I would like to invite Vinay Sreenivasa from ALF. I would like to reintroduce Vinay Sreenivasa again. Vinay Sreenivasa is an advocate and member of ALF, and his areas of interest include urban transport, urban poverty, informal sector, and urban governance. He is also part of the Street Vending Union in Bangalore. So I would like to hand over it to Vinay Sreenivasa.
Hi, my name is Vinay. I'm from Bangalore, as I said. been asked to speak on street vendors and uh, pedestrians and the right to the city and the right to spaces. In order to just speak about this, I just also want to touch upon how I came to start doing this work. I used to be a software engineer in an earlier life, and in 2009, when Bangalore was planning to widen around 91 roads and cut thousands of trees, there was a campaign by a group called Hasiru Usuru, and that's how I started getting involved because of the trees. And then once you started realizing why the trees were getting cut and that it was for road widening or a lot of trees were cut for the metro, then you started thinking about transport, right? And what is the best way for, what are the best transport options for the city? And once you started getting into transport, started looking at the whole street and who's controlling the street, what all is happening in the street, and then in 2010, there were street vendors in one area in Bangalore were evicted, and then we started working with the street vendors. And that time there was no law, there was just a street vendors policy. And eventually we realized that in Bangalore there's no street vendors union, so we thought that okay, maybe we should start unionizing street vendors, and that's how this whole journey started. The reason I say it is because when we look at street vendors, or whether we're looking at pedestrians, or we want to look at some of the things we looked earlier today, one thing is common is that we're looking at the streets of the city and how the streets of the city are transforming, right? And I specifically want to look at it from the angle of equity and justice, because when we're talking about mobility, when we're talking about streets, equity and justice are two things which are really important, but these are two things which are not coming out at all in the discourse. For example, every city that talks of mobility and talks of transport, the biggest thing that people talk about is congestion and how to reduce congestion, right? How do you move faster? And that seems to guide pretty much everything. And my point is, by just looking at congestion and looking at how to move faster, you're ignoring a whole lot of other issues which are there and a whole lot of needs of a whole section of people. And I'll explain more about that later. Firstly, I just want to talk about, we have a Street Vendors Act. It was passed in 2014. The Street Vendors Act, there's a section 3.3 which says that no street vendor should be evicted or relocated, as the case may be, till a survey is done of all street vendors and they're all registered. Even though this section is there which specifically says nobody can be evicted till a survey is done, street vendors across the country are getting evicted. This law is not really being followed. There are a couple of high courts where these evictions were challenged and stays were given, but that's not the case. I just want to talk about 4 evictions which we had to battle in the last 3-4 years to just give an idea of how things are shaping. Bangalore has a tiny independent republic called the Republic of Kormangla, where a lot of the people of these SPVs like Nandan, Nilankini and others stay there. And Kormangla believes it's a separate country and they need to have their own laws, and they control their streets. There is a road in Kormangla where there were around 100 vendors, mostly food vendors. The pavement was 20 feet. I measured it myself, so I know. It was 20 feet wide, and the road is also fairly wide. There was both sides parking. A lot of the vendors outside a park called Lakshmi Park were first evicted because the people walking inside the park could not stand the smell of chicken momos and chicken biryani. And then we had to have a protest, and then they came back. And then they were evicted again. And this time they were evicted because this time they were evicted by the traffic police. And when I spoke to the ACP traffic, he said that, do you know how much income tax people who are going to Whitefield and Electronic City pay, and all your street vendors are blocking traffic? Which is a ridiculous argument at 2 levels, because one, just because they are paying income tax and we are not paying income tax, it doesn't, I don't know why we have to be second class citizens. And 2, they were not disrupting any traffic. They were on a 20 feet footpath, they were occupying 4 feet closer to the wall, and there was parking, so it's not like the customers of the vendors were blocking parking as well. There was a protest, and again they came back, and then again they were evicted because of a fight with the corporator, but that's a different thing. Then there was another area called Krishnananda Nagara, which is close to some garment factories. Here there was a street vendors market which is there since 15-20 years. When the market started, this market is only in the evening between 4 and 8, caters only to the garment factory workers who come out. When the market started, there were no houses out there, but eventually people started building houses. They spent like maybe 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 70 lakhs, 1 crore for the site and house. After they built the houses, that's a revenue layout. It's not a planned BDA layout. The roads are very narrow. They all bought cars, and then they said, but we can't get our cars in and we can't get our cars out because the street vendors are there. And also the area looks dirty, and so the residents put pressure on the corporator and MLA to get these street vendors out, saying, I've spent 60 lakhs to build a house, and I have these vendors outside and I can't get my car in and can't get my car out. What is the point, right? So that was another thing. Third, there was an area called Rajaji Nagar. This is in the west of Bangalore, where in the year 2000, the urban local body actually did a survey of street vendors, gave licenses only to some 2000 vendors, but some of the vendors over here had licenses. There's a karate black belt by the name of Geeta Mishra who stays next to this market, and she was really against these street vendors for some reason. I don't know for what reason. She filed a case in the High Court. It didn't come up to anything. Then she filed another case, this time saying that the street vendors have blocked the drain, which is not the case. The corporation there was a drain which the corporation had filled up, and that was the footpath which was made by the corporation. Agreed, these people had taken up more space on the footpath than they should have. But after the first court case, that had got sorted out, there was space to walk. But she filed a PIL saying that the drain is blocked because of the street vendors. The High Court, the then Chief Justice, he was not really for street vendors, as are most of them. And they said, they have to remove their sheds. They have to come in carts, but you should be neither on the road nor on the footpath. It's a bit like this whole Hiranyakashipu thing. You can't be here, you can't be there, but where will you be, right? So as a result, they were again evicted. And there was a Bangalore Mirror front page article of the karate champ. He said that, saying that this is the karate champion who's like evicted everybody, and she wants to evict people across. She's going to take everybody to task. The reason I spoke of these particular examples is that when we're talking about the right to the city and when we're talking about our public spaces, that there is a certain people belonging to a certain class which is controlling these public spaces. So there might be a Street Vendors Act, there might be a law, there might be everything which protects the vendors. But basically, the image that the city wants to convey to street vendors and the others is that you have a right as long as we are okay with your right. The moment we are not okay with your right, whether you have a law, whether you have anything else, it doesn't matter. So, you have to go. Then close to our office is the Shivaji Nagar bus stand where vendors have been evicted. The traffic police gave us a written undertaking saying it's because of a High Court order. In that High Court case, there is no order passed. There is nothing which says you have to evict, but they have evicted. And sometimes that space is used for parking. They were evicted saying there's no space for pedestrians. The point is, like everywhere else, the pedestrians who are walking to and from the bus stand were the biggest customers of the street vendors there. Shivaji Nagar is an area where you'd get a jeans pant still for 200 rupees, for like 150 rupees. There are a lot of people who come even from different areas to buy clothes over here. So it was a really vibrant market. It helped a lot of people, especially the urban poor, not just the street vendors, but the people who were buying from them. But again, they were evicted in the name of pedestrians and and then parking. So this happened. Just around half a kilometer from this Shivaji Nagar is St. Mark's Road. St. Mark's Road has Koshis, it has Boring Institute, it has Hard Rock Cafe, it has all of these places where Janagraha, premier organization of Bangalore, decided to implement something called Tender Sure. And so this Tender Sure project was supposed to benefit pedestrians, and they widened the footpath, they narrowed down the road, and this project cost between like 10 to 18 crores a kilometer. It was everybody in the city was very happy with this Tender Sure footpath because it looks very good. The footpath is wide, there are a lot of pretty plants and flowers, and if you see on the surface, everybody should be happy. Essentially what they did was they streamlined the footpath, they widened it, both of which are good things. But along with this, they also said we're going to put all the cables and everything else down below, we're going to put the water down below, and a whole lot of underground engineering was done which nobody saw, and very few people thought of. There are some of us, of course, Vinay and like everybody, a lot of other people who raised questions, but very few people raised questions. So the street was redesigned, the footpath was redesigned for a particular purpose. It was supposed to be bus friendly, cyclist friendly, pedestrian friendly, all of those friendly. Except very few pedestrians on that road, and maybe after you finish from Koshis, maybe we'll go to Boring Institute, or after you finish at Hard Rock Cafe, go somewhere else. No harm in helping those pedestrians, I'm not denying that, but I'm saying footpath widening and road streamlining can be done without having to spend 8 to 10 crores a kilometer, and without having to shift all these underground utilities down below, especially when you can't do it for the rest of the city. The point is that Shivaji Nagar bus stand, where actually this footpath widening would have helped was not selected for this tender sure, right? Because there are a lot of street vendors, there were a lot of pedestrians. The vehicles are also maybe there, but pedestrians and street vendors have to be given preference. So why is it that this Tony St. Mark's Road was selected for this tender sure, and why is footpath widening? Why is footpath widening not done at Shivaji Nagar bus stand, or why is footpath not done in places where there really are a large number of working class pedestrians, where a lot of working class people are there, where you cannot walk? And given that we moved on to tender sure, I just also like to talk about transport. So there are two things, like I said, which is shaping the city's streets. One is transport is shaping cities like never before, and of course, like I said, a certain class of people. And this whole class and this transport again intersects. I'm also a member of Bengaluru Bus Prayanikara Vedike. We're a bus commuters forum. We've been working for the last 5 years. And one of our pet peeves is the fact that Bangalore's buses carry around 55 lakh people. They get barely 100 crores a year. But Bangalore Metro, which carries maybe 4.5 lakh a year now, 4.5 lakh a day now, is they've got around 14,000 crores for phase 1, another 26,000 crores current estimate for phase 2. After this phase 2 is done, which is maybe 2021, 2022, it will carry around 12 to 14 lakh people. Right. The point is, across the country, metros are getting thousands of crores of funding, whereas buses are not getting any support. Professor Bide spoke about BEST and the whole Mumbai Amchi BEST campaign as well. Across the country, buses are not getting supported. Buses have to pay taxes, metros get tax holidays. Metros, all we are saying is a simple thing in terms of parity. If you can fund the capital cost of metro, why can't you fund the capital cost of buses? Because after all, buses are carrying many more people. So why is this neglect, right? At the same time, it's not just the metro. Today we just got the news that Bangalore, there's a new peripheral ring road which is going to come up. Again, that's another 20,000 crores. So this will be elevated. It'll be elevated ring road with some space below for another metro to come on top, right? So we're spending 20,000 crores for peripheral ring road, 30,000 crores for elevated corridors, and 40,000 crores for the metro. That is totally around 80,000 crore or 90,000 crore. The whole of Karnataka's health, education, housing, all of these can be taken care of at 80,000 crores, right? So why is a particular city's transport need fulfilled so much at the cost of everything else? And this is also what we mean when we mean equity and justice. Why is one city, agreed that this one city has 1 crore out of the 6 crore population, but this whole frenzy, like I said earlier, of this congestion, and you have to move fast. You have to move fast, you have to reduce congestion, so therefore all of these things are done. We have, at the same time, after spending these 80,000 crore, the waste pickers, the Paura Karmikas, the domestic workers, their transport need is not taken care of. Their bus is not improved. People who have to walk, domestic workers who have to walk 30 minutes, 40 minutes a day from interior areas, they won't get a mini bus. They'll not have any improved pedestrian facilities. So all this 80,000 crore is spent for a certain small section of the population only. Again, where is the equity and where is the justice? This is something that we absolutely need to think of, right? And the point is, speaking of all of these things, we issued a press release from our Bus Prayanikara Vedike, the Bus Commuters Forum, 2 weeks back, because the government is planning to raise bus fares. Pedestrians, cyclists and bus users cause the least congestion, cause the least pollution. Okay, bus users may be like a fraction, but pedestrians and cyclists none. But these people are the ones who are taxed the most, right? Because pedestrians find it most difficult, cyclists find it most difficult, and bus users, of course. So we said that bus users, we're causing the least problem, but you're raising fares and you're taxing us. Whereas you can park a SUV in the city of Bangalore without having to pay 50 paisa for a whole day. There's absolutely no parking charge, and you can park it, right? So where is the parity in the use of the street? If the street is a common, is a commons, and there has to be equitable use, where is the equitable use? This is something that we have to talk about. And again, coming back to the topic of street vendors and pedestrians, many people pitch street vendors versus pedestrians. So like this Independent Republic of Kormangla, which frequently evicts vendors, saying that we don't have space to walk. And there are other areas in this whole IT corridor from like Electronic City to Whitefield. There's a whole lot of RWAs who are doing like all kinds of things. And one particular RWA called for that whole area to be made a no vending zone. the Supreme Court has clearly said that somebody's right to livelihood, protected under 19G of the Constitution, cannot be disrupted because somebody else's right to walk is getting affected. What are we saying? We're a civilized society. Surely there can be a way where both can coexist. After all, street vendors are not against pedestrians. Street vendors' customers are pedestrians. What we need to make sure is that we have a system where both of these can coexist, right? And but that doesn't happen. The moment somebody complains, you get evicted. So this Twitter and Facebook has been like the biggest bane for us, for the street vendor union in Bangalore. The moment people have these smartphones, they'll just stop, take a picture, put it on Twitter, put it on Facebook, track Bangalore traffic police. Bangalore traffic police is very active on Facebook and Twitter. You put a photo and then you'll get evicted, right? And then sometimes they proactively do it to get like brownie points. So this Banchankri is an area that traffic police station has a Twitter handle. Bangalore is, I think, the only probably city where each police station has a Twitter handle. So this Twitter handle of Banchankri evicted vendors proudly and said, look what we have done, we evicted all these vendors today on Twitter. And I said, look, I said on Twitter that look, there is a law, you cannot do this. They said, we'll take your opinion into consideration. I said, it's not my opinion, it's the law. But this is what happens. And we've given any number of representations to traffic police in Kannada, we'll give it on our letterhead, nothing much happens. This time we thought, why don't we send them an email, because they feel that whoever says anything on this online thing, you have to take it seriously. So this time after this tweet, we sent them an email from our federation email ID to the traffic commissioner of police, and that was immediately forwarded to all the traffic police stations. Now all of them are emailing us saying, okay, fine, the law is there. I'm saying it's most ridiculous. When you submitted a paper memorandum on a letterhead saying the same thing, you will not do anything. We submitted an email, and suddenly it's forwarded to the entire city, and people are getting back. So anyway, coming back to the Street Vendors Act and what I spoke of earlier, the Street Vendors Act has something called a Town Vending Committee, which is precisely supposed to be this kind of civilized mechanism where if there are problems between pedestrians and street vendors and whoever else, it has to be resolved. The Street Vendors Act is not really implemented across the country that much. It continues to be violated. There are to be rules framed for each state. The rules are not yet finalized. After the rules are finalized, a Town Vending Committee has to be there, and then you have to do an entire survey. From the surveyed street vendors, you form an electoral college and elect street vendors. I'm not a very big fan of this Street Vendors Act. Right from the time the bill was there in 2011, we've been filing our objections. But because I feel that when you're trying to formalize the informal economy, the state is obviously want to have more control. The Street Vendors Act is called Protection of Livelihoods and Regulation of Street Vending, but there's more emphasis on the regulation than on the protection of livelihoods. And once the act comes, if you don't have a certificate of registration, you can be evicted immediately. And through the process of rules formation, we've been seeing that the state is trying to assert control through these rules. I've been working with the National Hawkers Federation, so nationwide network of street vendor unions, and across the states, we've been seeing that the emphasis is more on control. This is something for us to think about, that every time we try to formalize something informal through the law in a space such as ours, what really does happen and what is the kind of impact that it has. Which is why in our work with the sex workers union also, we tell them a lot of times that push for decriminalization, don't push for legislation to support. We don't need legalizing, we need decriminalizing, which is what would have helped for street vendors as well. But anyway, NHF, NASFI and like many other people who wanted the law. I'll just end over here. Just to recap again, two things. The streets of our cities are changing very fast. Transport is a very big factor because of which this is changing. The other thing is the aesthetic which is required by a certain class. These are all leading to the way our cities are being shaped. There is no equity or justice today in the way streets are being used. Streets are commons which have to be used equitably, but they are not. And which is why we are in this. So if we change the whole lens to one of equity and justice, I think we'll be able to start making a difference. Sorry, just before I end, just one quick thing. Sorry, I'm taking 20 minutes already. Just one quick thing, as far as the pedestrians are concerned, again speaking of equity, and in Bangalore we've been crying ourselves hoarse saying, you can't build skywalks and subways for us. Why is it that the car user and the motorbike user can go on level ground, but we have to climb up and down? But unfortunately, the way the whole debate has been, the way the whole discourse has been, there's a lot of push for skyways and subwalks, to the point that when you're coming from Bangalore airport towards the city, you'll come near a junction called ST Mall Junction near Hebbal, where there was a pelican light, and there was a college girl who was crossing that pelican light, and a speeding truck came and killed her. It knocked her down when she was crossing the pelican light, after which a whole lot of people led agitation for a skywalk. The point is, we have come to a place where pedestrians are saying, give us a skywalk, because even if we have a pelican light, then somebody might come knock us down. We'll willfully relocate ourselves above or below, but we don't want to walk. It's like, we've given up our right to at grade crossing, we have given up our right to the street, and we're saying we just want to live. So just build a skywalk. Whether the lift works, escalator works, it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, we'll just use the skywalk and go. This is the kind of situation where we are in. Again, if you were to look at it from an equity and justice point of view, we would have said, no, we need to cross over here. The car can do whatever it wants. The car can stop for 30 seconds, but we need to cross. But that's not been there, unfortunately. So my request to all of you is, again, to look at the whole use of streets from the views of equity and justice, and maybe we can talk more in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vinay, for sharing your thoughts on how certain clusters are controlling the street vendors and how the shaping of streets is controlled by Transport and the Street Vendors Act. Now I would like to request Lakshmi to join the dais for the question and discussion session.
Hi, this question is directed to Mr. Vinay. So I come from an organization called Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. We work with the city to in many streets projects, and we try to fight for pedestrian justice. So this is a case that recently happened in the neighborhood of Adyar, when the corporation was trying to provide footpaths on certain streets. There were entire neighborhoods trying to protest against providing footpaths because vendors would come and occupy that space. So the infrastructure itself was questioned. It wasn't about evicting an economy, but it was about the infrastructure itself being opposed to. So my question here is, have you had experience with dealing with, or rather engaging with neighborhoods where we try, or where the importance of vending as an economy beyond just being a source site? Have you had any experience like that, where you have to deal with neighborhoods or engage with them?
We've had experience of engaging with neighborhoods, and it's largely been very difficult. One issue could also be that we've had to enter the space when there's already a conflict, like that street vendors union near the garment factory. So when they evicted these vendors through the corporator and MLA, we asked the corporator, we said, you fix a meeting with the residents, we'll sit and talk to them, we'll see what their problems are, we'll address it. But they were just way too aggressive. They did not want any kind of dialogue. They just came to the meeting and just said, we just want them out, we just want them out, we just want them out. But there have been some, there's another area in Bangalore where there is another group where they were trying to redesign the street to make it easier for cyclists, buses, pedestrians and street vendors. So these are some residents from that area itself. This is Bangalore has a bicycle mayor called Satya Shankaran. So Satya was leading one of those groups, and so that was okay. Where they said that we recognize everybody's right to the street, and we're okay. But largely, the experience is difficult, and we don't face problems from residents in poorer neighborhoods. It's all these upscale neighborhoods, Kormangla, Indranagar, this whole IT belt. Whitefield to Electronic City, or even this other place, this Krishnanagar, where there are richer people. That's where we face a lot of problem. They look down upon street vendors. It's very difficult to engage unless there is some other corporator, MLA or somebody else also who can if they try to be neutral, which they may or may not be.
Hello, so I'm Sahaj. I represent a startup called Indian Youth Cafe, and actually recently we did a survey with the fishermen at Marina Beach. You can see a lot of ladies, akkas and aunties selling a lot of fishes on the beach side. So we did survey with around 10 to 15 women, and and we found that like they are very eager to get some business unit where they can work, they can get a better livelihood through some kind of small business units that they can get in. So like we as a startup are trying to find out some solutions through cargo texture. So trying to install some shipping containers in spaces which are unoccupied. So that's what like we asked them, and we asked a very simple question to each and every women over there, that if government will give you 80 square feet space within a 20 feet container, let's say, for one particular business, let's say selling fish there, fresh fish there. So we had this question, we asked each and every lady, and they told that yes, we are ready to pay government if they provide us 80 square feet space within a container. We are ready to pay rent to them, and that can change the whole scenario of that place. So government has provided those people homes, but they have not provided them space to do business, which is very shocking. So can you just let us know how we can take it forward? So we are trying to do some enable some public-private partnership through our startup, which has largely been unsuccessful. But we are trying to do something for them. That okay, and every person from all around the world first like visit to Marina Beach. They come to Marina Beach and see Chennai. And that is the first reaction like you get. I went to Marina Beach back in 2008, and that was the first thing. Then we went to street vendors, street hawkers selling on beaches. So why don't we, we have so many shipping containers, disused shipping containers all over the country. Why don't we use them to create some spaces? Why is that is it possible? Can we talk more about that, and can we propagate those ideas and make it successful, to enable some spaces for these, street vendors, hawkers and everyone. So I just want to know from all of you, whoever can, get me some insights on this. Thank you.
Actually, I visited Kannagi Nagar and all those urban thing. I found to know some kind of art and architecture itself, there is a more facility for hygienic condition. Hygienic and health related issues, it will become no proper drainage facility is not planned. Almost 2000 families mobilized. There is no waste management collection. We in-depth grassroots तक जाके analysis किया. Even the corporation people are not deputed dustbin and collecting the waste collector, that kind of factors. So total ulta after mobilizing the thing, implementing one by one. But in abroad, I visited in Singapore and Dubai, all those things. Infrastructure ready होने के बाद वो crowd का mobilization होगा. इधर total उल्टा है. Mobilization होने के बाद सभी को बीमारी आने के बाद सभी को मीडिया में hype होने के बाद में what it is, this kind of, whether this kind of culture can be, it will be changed. I am purely impressed with ma'am का Swachh that implementation. That is very brainstorming instrument, and purely impressed on your presentation. So if there is kind of, we can limelight to the, I can make arrangement with Tamil Nadu government people also, you can throw this light on this thing. So that's the thing. Thank you. Ma'am, but only one thing, this slum thing, we have to make it up to uplift, we have to take it, they are also human beings, they are also our brothers and sisters. Whether I can able to live there for 4 to 6 hours, I can't able to tolerate, ma'am. Some kind of bad smell, some kind of hygienic condition. Whether I can't able to leave my home without any fan is more terrible. That power problem is also going a lot of irritation. So why do you people are allowing to, some kind of checklist has to be submitted before occupation the thing. This is my humble request. Okay. And thank you for 80,000 investments coming. As you know, today only I know. So it will be good for me for my career.
Project is over, and I think this has been repeatedly also said within the government at the highest level. I have seen minutes of meetings by the Chief Secretary with heads of all departments saying that it should be a complete package, including...
The third party, if you give the consent, the people will react. That's why you say, right?
Which people?
You will be a third party people.
No, I'm a third party, but which people will react? No, yeah, so this has been raised many times with the government. We do studies, we have presented it to them, etc. Repeatedly actually. And there were moments in the past which were better, and some things, as I said, have improved in the sense the spatial norm has improved. So if you go to Gudapakam, which I showed you, which is way out, it's in a rural area, the housing is better than anything you're seeing in Kannagi Nagar or whatever, so what you were saying, it's a horrible situation, it's not that horrible there. The problem is there again, very, very simple solutions. Connectivity to the main road. They don't have that. So they have the path just to the main road, 1.5 kilometers path or whatever, is dark, unlit, unpaved, scary, unsafe. They haven't put street lights. I mean, they're very simple things, but when you start talking with them, then there is all of these issues of coordination, that department has to do. No, now it is that the resident welfare, they have taken a policy decision, the resident welfare associations will be formed in these colonies and they have to take charge of it, but they haven't worked out how they will. So the funding, that is, people pay for maintenance, they pay certain different amounts per month. That money should be going to the welfare association, but they haven't figured out anything beyond that. How will people control? How are they elected? How, what is the accountability? What tells you that a bunch of men are not just going to control this money and not do any work? So all those things they haven't thought through. So I guess my only bottom line to this is that this is discriminatory housing. This is something where we don't give enough attention and we don't care that much. We would put a lot more time, attention, thought into something which was again not for the lowest castes, for people that we just don't think are that important. We've pushed them out there, we've given them, it's not free housing, but it's cheap housing. So what more do they want and why should we bother? Slowly they start putting things in, but time is the key thing. By the time they put in the important things, it's already 5, 6, 7 years, and the livelihoods and the lives of these families have become devastated in many ways. So they have a door-to-door collection, they have people that they have set up to do the self-help groups doing this, but all of it has come too late, too little. But there are many good initiatives, I have to also say that. They have started boys clubs, they have started these evening classes for children with sports activities. Now in Kannagi Nagar, 17 years later, the children are going abroad and playing matches in kabaddi and things like that. So I mean, there are things that are happening, but we are still reproducing these colonies that take 15 to 20 years of people's lives being broken to come up. We can show a few good examples, but basically this is what we're doing.
To this question of why the state is not providing space for street vendors to do business and why they're doing business on the streets, there are two things. Street vendors do business on the street because they don't have enough capital to rent out a shop or to lease a shop or to buy a shop, so they're there. The state does create very little kind of shops. If you look at ULBs do build some shops, but nowadays they're all building this ground plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 kind of thing, and whatever you're selling on the street, you can't move to first floor and second floor and sell because nobody will buy. Chennai City Corporation in fact has done that, it has failed. Bangalore has done that in 1 or 2 places, it has failed. But I don't know about the shipping container, maybe it's a viable thing. I've not seen the container or the space. There are some vendors who want to move away from the street to a shop. For example, in our union, sometimes they say that, please write to the corporation because they're building some new shops, we want that. There are some others who say that we don't want any of those shops. What we want is right here where we are building proper facilities like, shelter from rain and the sun and access to free public toilets and some go downs. So there are many people who are happy to vend on the street, but they want these facilities because the business is also happening on the street. The moment you go to a shop and you have to pay the lease and this, that and all that, it becomes unviable sometimes.
That we see some people as less than human, and it's our willingness to accept it that seems to create this whole thing. My question is, the government is the same government that creates the housing board, which has created some of the best neighborhoods in Bangalore as well as in Chennai. Very well laid roads and beautiful. Some of these neighborhoods that you're mentioning were all housing boards. So there was a definite plan, high income, middle income, low income, and then people who did not, maybe they were seen as no income groups. And there is method to this whole madness. We live in houses, almost many of us here must be living in one of those neighborhoods. They go, typical the Indira Nagars, the Kamraj Nagars, the different nagars were all very well laid out. So it is the thinking, it is the lack of sensitivity and the lack of awareness and our willingness to accept this divide that seems to sustain all these things that you mentioned. So what efforts have you taken in terms of raising and sensitization and raising awareness among us, not the government officials themselves, in the public?
I'm an academic, so the thing that I do most is do studies and write and put it out. And I've also, I agree with you that a lot of the problem is the public and that we are very content if we don't see the slums around. We never ask the question, where have they gone? Some of us whose mates may be coming from there are aware that these huge colonies are out there. And most of us even, and some of us even start to realize the violence that is perpetrated on youth there because the sons of our maids are beaten up, etc. So there is at that level some consciousness of this. But as Vinay is pointing out, we don't ask the question when a slum is cleared, we're just glad it's not there, right? We don't ask the question of where have these people gone. And if we were to say, well, can we have in-situ housing built of these EWS groups, that's the thing, in our backyard, most of us would say no. So we don't want in our backyard the poor. We don't want street vendors in our front yard because they are seen as a security risk, and we don't want low-income housing in our. So this is so. By the way, the agency for this, there are two different agencies. There's the housing board which builds for HIG, MIG, LIG, and for EWS or slum rehousing, it's a different institution, and you can see a lot of the quality issues there too, in terms of capacity, in terms of a lot of these things, and in terms of standards. So one of the things I think when you ask what have we been doing, I guess is we've been pushing for standards. The idea is that you formalize somebody's housing, you are the state, you have to stick to the highest possible standards of services and amenities. Therefore, we've been, pulling out the standards and all of these things. How many ration shops should there be, etc. When you speak to them, they say, yeah, there's supposed to be 70. We have made provision for 40. Meaning, how can they ask for 70? Even if the norms are. So, I guess my message to them always is that you cannot compromise here. So that itself is a new thing for them to hear, because this is not, in that language has never been spoken back to the officials, that you are the second tier provisioning, this discriminatory provisioning, this low quality provisioning. I've been calling them on that. And I think there is this is something that I think at the level of policy they keep talking about. The IAS officers are always saying, we should remove them till everything is okay, or we should in this thing, it's very important to service them properly, etc. That level, yes, it happens. The level of officials on the ground, they're punitive. The police, they won't register an FIR if a child is missing until a senior officer. So it is, as you say, deep in our consciousness that these people don't deserve anything better. So we need to ask ourselves the question about, and this is a caste society, and this is where it plays out. You see it playing out at that level. So we need to face it at that, I think, level, and that's where the discussion has to be. I think today was in some ways just letting people know, have an awareness that these colonies are there. And this is how a lot of our working class youth are growing up.
Thank you so much for the questions, and with this I would like to end this session. And before I end this session, I would like to thank Ms. Lakshmi, Dr. Karen, and Mr. Vinay for your insight into different topics relating to Right to the City. Thank you so much.